All right, so I want to kind of shift gears now. That other stuff, I'm done, and I want to talk with you today just about things that kind of make me in my leadership style. Because I think it's just important that you know that stuff. But I also want to take this opportunity to use this as a training moment where I can maybe help bring some things to you that maybe you're not aware of, or different concepts or things you can do when you look at leadership that can be beneficial for you. This, as Tim was talking this morning, this is kind of the second and third article, church looking at the first article, realities of leading organizational entities and how relationships need to work within those organizational realities. And so I'm going to take between now and 10:30 this time to just kind of pour some stuff into you and just do a little bit of a download on some of this. Now, the first thing that the principal is going to share is this thing I call the analogy of the car. This is, if you've ever read any of Borden's stuff, like Direct Hit, kind of the ideas come out of that, but it's something that I've just kind of developed a little further. You'll note very, very quickly, I am no graphic artist, so here's just my stuff that I want to be able to put out there. But if you've been around me at all, you have seen me or heard me talk about the analogy of the car, because this is the number one most foundational thing that I believe. And it's stuff that I've done with small business conferences. I've done it in consulting with real estate and development firms, using it in some of our schools as well as in churches. So let's just kind of walk through it and let me kind of help you know how I'm wired and how I look at these things organizationally and how this would work together, at least in what I bring with my presuppositions. So the question starts with, what is driving your organization? What is the entity, and I'm not talking about the person, but I'm talking about more of the element of an organizational reality that's in your driver's seat. Each of these cars that I like to talk about organizationally have 4 seats. And what's important about the 4 seats is how you sequence them affects the outcome. So wherever these 4 things get placed in the car, it's going to have a beneficial or a negative impact organizationally. Now, I've always thought that the first and best thing to put in the driver's seat would be vision, right? Because you don't want necessarily, it used to be we could say, well, you wouldn't want a blind man or nobody driving your car, but now we have non-driver cars driving on our roads all the time. So it's just kind of a weird deal as life goes and changes. But the idea of vision being where it needs to be. When I was in college, I had a friend by the name of Ken Pickle. It really was his last name. Ken actually later died of AIDS as he lived a homosexual lifestyle. But he was my friend, and we were in the same apartment complex together, and we went to Cal State Sacramento together, which is my undergrad. And there was a time when I didn't have a car, and so I would go down to get a ride from Ken, and Ken had an old Volkswagen Beetle, the beat-up kind. How many of you had one of those growing up, right? There's a bunch of you, yeah. And once a Bug fan, always a Bug fan, right? Yeah. And so here's how we do it. We'd go down to his car, and then he'd open up the passenger door because he'd had so many accidents, the driver's door was jammed shut, and it wouldn't open. And so he would climb across the passenger seat and over the gear shift and into his seat. And then I'd get in and I'd pick up the seat and move it back because it wasn't attached to the floor. I could just push it back for my height. So I'd push it all the way back to the rear seat. And then off we'd go. And there's no seat belts, there's no nothing in this thing, except you realize why they had straps in a Volkswagen, particularly when you're now sitting in a rocking chair, right? Now, the thing that was interesting about it is, while that was always fun, because Ken either drove full speed or he was at a dead stop. So, I mean, it was just a mess and rather terrifying driving with him. But on the days when we would go to school when there was rain, he didn't have windshield wipers either. So here's what we would do. We'd come downstairs, he'd get into the passenger door, go over, jump into the driver's seat. I'd come in, adjust the seat for my height, and then I'd roll down the window. He would reach behind his car, pull out, or his seat, and pull out a long plastic bag and 2 rubber bands, which I would pull over my arm and attach the rubber bands above my elbow and at my wrist, and then hand me a long-handled squeegee. And it was my job as he drove to be the windshield wipers. And it gives that whole great Proverbs 29 King James Version, you know how to say it, right? Where there is no vision, the people perish, right? Absolutely true. And where there is no vision, the NIV says, people cast off restraint. We don't know where we're going. Vision is the critical element. Most groups, when they ask me to come in and consult with them, and I get a lot of groups that will come in and churches will say, would you come help us with our polity? We need to fix this. We need to become a policy-based governance. We've heard that's the thing to do. And I realize you don't have a structure problem, you have a vision problem because you have nothing that you're pursuing. The second seat is relationships. If you don't have someone who buys into the vision, all you have is an idea. This is the critical seat in the car. I mean, vision is the thing that's going to at least take you a direction. But if there is no relationship, you have no organization. When I have young staff, and I've been blessed in the last number of years, when they first came on board, I had a 25-year-old and 2 26-year-old full-time DCE and a worship director, incredible young leaders. And I would sit with them, and Dana and Emily and Chris, we'd talk, and then they'd say, I'm really struggling with this. I'm trying to lead, and I'm trying to do this. And then I would always say to them, how much time have you spent in the second chair? How much time have you invested in relationships? Because if relationships are not key for you, then you're going nowhere. Is that not true, pastors and leaders? If your congregation says, great idea, pastor, but you know what? We either don't know you enough or don't trust you enough or whatever it is, they're not going to go with you there. And you've got to take time to build the relationships. Critical. If you find that your vision's going nowhere, stop, go back, build more relationships. Take them deeper. Invite more people into the journey. Take more people into your confidence and ask them to be advocates for you. It's stuff that we've got to do, because the relationships are key. Now, what I want you to note is we haven't put anything in the car yet that's called ministry or activity, or if it's in business, product. That's the third seat. Because here's what happens. From vision and the relationship and their interaction with one another, you end up with a product. You end up with something that comes out. It's ministry, it's small groups, it's whatever it ends up becoming in our lives of our congregations. It becomes the thing we then say, this is what we now do. Now, we know we preach the gospel, we administer the sacraments. That's a given kind of thing, okay? That's part of what we do. But we do it within relationships. And as those things work in us, as God uses His Word through His Spirit, it then creates in us ideas and directions and ministries and ways to reach out and all the rest, okay? Now, the fourth seat is the seat that's probably the least important, and it's structure. Structure can be whatever it needs to be. Structure is the clothes hanger inside the clothes. What is it that you need to have in order to empower the rest of those things in their sequence to work effectively? Now, here's what a dysfunctional group looks like. We end up, usually when there's dysfunction and problems, and when things aren't going well, which of those 4 words do you think people want to put into the driver's seat? You got it. As soon as things start going wrong, we're going to say, you know what we need? More control. And often when I get asked to come in and help people with their governance issues, it's often the lay people going, our pastor needs some shaping, or our pastor needs to be pulled back, or our pastor needs to be put in a box. And it's, you know what caused that usually? Which are the other words? Relationships broke down. If you're finding that's going on and you got people resisting you right now, you need to just stop and go back and pour into relationships. Always. It always should be the default that you need to be at. Then when things aren't going right, now we need to have a reason to exist. So now we're going to do stuff. Notice relationship's not even in the front seat at this point. Because now they're going to look at you when things aren't going well. They're going to say, well, how many calls have you made? Who have you, how many hospitals have you gone to? What have you done here? What have you done there? Let's talk about evaluations. What's the product? Because then we have to defend ourselves by showing that there's value having us around. And here's what I do. Then relationships get thrown in the back seat. And sometimes relationships could be in the other seat, or, it doesn't matter necessarily where. They just get thrown in the back seat. They're important. We give lip service to them, but we're not driving through them. And then the fourth is vision. Most congregations that are struggling have a vision and relationship problem. It is often a relationship problem before it's a vision problem. Because if we're driving the vision and you're saying, well, they're not supporting me. There's a reason they're not supporting you. It's because you need to go spend more time in relationships. Have a long view, not a short view, on how we're doing things organizationally. Now, I want to take you a little further now into the second point. Now, I want to do more with relationships for a minute, because this is so critical. And this is the stuff that we learn as life gets lived, right? I remember listening to John Maxwell once, and he said, somebody came to me and said, man, John, I wish I knew 20 years ago what you taught today. And his comment was, I didn't know what I know today 20 years ago, right? Because it's a shift, it's learning, it's going to the school of hard knocks where we learn things. So I want to introduce you to stuff that I picked up along the way. This is from, many of you may know Kurt Bickle. He's a Lutheran educator. Sue Easton. This is stuff on missional teaming is what it's called. But I want you to note the continuums. The bottom one is the importance of the task, or the thing that you're trying to get accomplished. The one on the left is the importance of relationship. The closer you are to the corner, you have low relationship and low task. That what you're trying to get accomplished really isn't too big a deal, and you really don't care about the person much. Okay? That's the moment when we just kind of go, yeah, whatever. That's avoidance in our relationships with others. Now, if we say, this task matters so much, now we come as the leader and we say, Richard Paul to his vicars, I'm going to tell you what to do. Because you need to learn, and sometimes when we're brand new, we need people in leadership to impose to say this is the way it needs to be, because I need you to build some foundational realities. But we're going to impose initially. That's one way to do it. Now, on the other side of it, if you decide, the relationship matters so much that task maybe isn't so important, but what happens, you see what that word is up on the top left, accommodation. And sometimes when we accommodate people enough, we move into highly dysfunctional relationships. And that's not healthy for us either. The goal is to get out there so that we have high task and high relationship. And you know what? That takes time, it takes effort, it takes prayer, did I say time? I'll say it again like 5 times. It takes time, because a lot of us are just not willing to make that investment. But that's where it's going to pay off. Now, a lot of times we get to a place where we're going, okay, we're kind of trying to figure this out. Well, why don't we just compromise? Compromise is never a win-win. There's always a lose-lose in there somewhere, because we've given up something in order to get it accomplished. The highest form of this relationship is in collaboration. Collaboration is the idea that if we can have the most incredible relationship and the highest function of our task, then we can create something brand new that we've never had before. Or we could take it into places we've never experienced it before. I encourage you in your relationships, as you're driving the car, as you're trying to see vision happen, take the time so that you can be collaborating with others. Now, here's another piece, and one that's probably most familiar of the pieces that I want to share with you, but it's the Tuckman model of organizational teaming, the organizational dynamics. And that is that every time a group gets together, this cycle happens. You form, you storm, you norm, and you perform And then often there's an adjourning where that discontinues as well. But if you can remember those first 4 words, forming, storming, norming, and performing, it is true in every single system. Add a new child into the family. Is there going to be storming? Add a new staff person into your church. Is there going to be storming as people figure out, where are my boundaries? How do I do this? What can I accomplish? How far can I push this? You ever worked with young children? And you draw a line and say, look, Mom and Daddy love you. We don't want you running out the street. You can't go past this line on the sidewalk. And where are you going to see their toes? On the line. There's a little bit of a power play there. You ever been played one against the other by your kids, your wife and husband? The kids go, well, Dad said. And then you go check with Dad, and Dad never said. Because we're trying to play the power. See? You get a new district president, they're storming. Because you go, well, he's not Stottero. He wore a suit to these things. Someone asked me this morning at breakfast, so did you have a bunch of shirts made? I go, yep, anything not to wear a tie. All right? Now, I wear them when it's appropriate, but hey, I'm a Southern California beach guy. And that's, I'll be appropriately dressed when it's time for things like that, okay? Forming, storming, norming. You see, you get to a point where you start to find your rhythm. But you don't get there until you've worked your way through some conflict first. The conflict is critical. The conflict shapes you. It's the second seat work of relationships is where conflict is. And we don't like it, and so we back away from it. And I'll show you another slide that explains that in a minute. And then when you get to norming where we go, okay, this kind of feels good. And then we start to perform at a much higher level. And then all of a sudden, someone on the team takes a call, or someone retires, or something changes. And then all of a sudden, we bring a new staff person in, and guess where you start? Forming. You got to start all over again. You got to start all over again. Costa Mesa, incredible team, love it. The best team I ever worked with in my life before coming to the district office, by the way. I will say that. President company here. And as soon as I leave, they're doing fine, but they've been storming along the way just because things changed. Things changed. Don't ever think it's not going to happen. So here's the next piece I just want to show you. I just wanted you to be impressed with my graphics too. So you come together and you start, and you have low relationship and you have low task. And that's green. That's your honeymoon. That's where I'm at right now, by the way. That's my honeymoon. And the green's great because the green feels good and we like the green. And it's kind of like Peter, James, and John on the Mount of Transfiguration. Lord, it is good for us to be here. Let's stay right here. And you know what? We have way too many churches, way too many organizations, way too many businesses that stay in the green. Doesn't mean they're not happy, but they're not always effective as they could be. Because in order to go to the next level, you have to storm. And sometimes we stick our feet in there and we go, ooh, that storming water's pretty hot. I don't want to go there. And so we fall back into the norms. You see, we fall back into the norms because the norms are comfortable, the norms are safe, the norms are the place that we feel the best. And that's the idea of so many of us within our congregations where our churches have just kind of landed and we're in our norm. And we know that there's change. We know that there's something better we could become than what we are now. But in order to get there, we know that we need to go through the red to get to the blue. And we don't want to pay the price. My friends, that's leadership, is to go from the green to the blue. It's for you to help lead change, to help people think. Because leading change requires the leader to create dissatisfaction with the status quo so that people can see that there's something better or another opportunity than what they see that's in their, their norm at the moment. But that's hard. But change and growth doesn't happen until we've gone through the red. And then when we hit the blue, that's like sky high, baby, right? Now, somebody new comes in, and where do you have to go? Back to the green. And you kind of go, nobody had better ever leave my team. And do not want to do this. And yet, how many of you, in my case, I've served, not only, I've been the only pastor of a 90-member congregation, okay? And it was me and a part-time secretary when she'd show up. And then I've been privileged to have a bigger staff like in Costa Mesa. And I just think about how much of my life I have spent searching for team members. And every time you go into it, you kind of go, oh, gee, we got to do that whole storming thing again. But it's part of the reality. It's part of the reality, and there's no way to shortcut it. This is an extra piece. I'm not going to charge you any extra for this. This is just something that I think has some value. And that is that when I meet with people, it's very helpful to kind of consider what I need to become or be in the moment as a leader for someone else. Okay, let's take my friend Andy. And Andy and I have, we kind of have a brand new relationship. He's just come on new, and we're working together. And we're at this point where I just kind of say, you know what, Andy, I want to help you grow, and I want to help you understand things. So I'm going to spend a little time and effort teaching you some things. And so I'm going to instruct you. Now, you notice that's not real high on the relationship scale, but it's real high on the task scale, because Andy, as a new team member, needs to learn things. All right? Now, as we grow, the place where I would next want to take him is into coaching, where as a high relationship and as he's developing his skill set in task, I want to just be able to coach him and help him. Just he comes in, checks in, and I provide some guidance, but I'm kind of launching Andy and letting him go. That's the goal, right? To be able to function that way. And then as things go along, Andy and I in our relationship, because the relationship is so high, and I don't need to be so involved in the task anymore, I become more of a cheerleader for Andy. Good job, brother. I like what you're doing. Let me give you a little feedback, but you're doing awesome. And then on the delegation thing, I don't need to spend so much time on this issue with Andy, because Andy's got it. And so our time together and my involvement in the task is not as critical. So one of the things I've done over the years when I've sat down with team members, and that maybe this would be the kind of stuff that maybe if we sit down together and talk, I might ask you, what do you need me to be for you today? Do you need me to instruct you, to coach you, to cheer you, or to delegate to you? It just allows for the relationship to go smoothly and the opportunity for outcomes to be a little more defined. Together. You've heard me say that multiple times this weekend. Being together is critical. The problem is that too many of us live in relationship where we are in organizations or systems that are more like silos, where we have each our own entities in how we look at stuff, rather than being together, moving together as a team. Sometimes we can look like this. That's a group, that's a team, right? But it's still a bunch of individuals, each standing in their own little departments. We have our chaplain here. You guys do this stuff. I don't mean this part, but the idea of dealing with teams and moving toward one outcome in a very good way, because you kind of trained a lot of the rest of the world on how to do that, as our military does. The thing that needs to happen is for us to all move the right direction at the same time together. High relationships build on high vision with a clear outcome and whatever kind of structure we need in order to get where we need to go. And in doing so, that we would come to a place where we're moving together. I want to show you a little video clip for some fun, but also for the lesson.
You're right. I know you can.
Lucky thing!
Now go! Hurry!
Tell all the fish to swim down!
Well, you heard my son? Come on!
Sorry! You have to tell everybody to
Swim down together! You understand what I'm saying to you? Swim down!
Everybody swim down! Come on, you have to swim down! Swim down, okay?
Down! Swim down! Swim down! Swim down! Don't give up! Keep swimming! Just keep swimming! That's it!
It's working!
Just keep swimming! Keep swimming!
Come on, Dad!
You're doing great, son!
That's my dad!
Come on, let's get to the bottom! Keep swimming!
Keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
Almost there! Keep swimming!
That Finding Nemo would teach us an important principle on first article realities. Dr. Bierman said it really, really well yesterday. We have been trained in our culture to be individuals. And that we have as individuals freedoms that give us the right to be individuals. And he said that is contrary to what Jesus taught in the scriptures. It's true. God's gift to us in Christ. You're not going to offend me if you get coffee. Just keep listening. Just don't everybody go at once. Then I'll start to worry. Jesus is pretty clear. It is body life. It's body life. It's about being together. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of us all. Have the same mind and the same... you don't need me quoting scripture to you. You can quote it. Have the same mind as that of Christ Jesus. Do life together. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I mean, it's there. But when we get into practice, what do we end up doing? Our own thing. And then as we do our own thing, I start worrying that, if I befriend you and we start doing stuff as church, what if my people like you better? And I'm not sure I can handle that if I had a bunch of people who slid over to another place. Well, I don't want that either. But we're still the body of Christ. You see, I believe with all my heart that a first article focus for the church can be vision with high relationships where we trust each other as brothers and sisters in Christ, as pastors and leaders within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Pacific Southwest District. And we are in that second seat together, and we are committed to one another together so that we can produce the very best ministry, make it harder to go to hell from PSD because of the work that we do together. That's the thing. And then swim down together. Do it together. Do it together. This is the concept that's behind my suggestion, my request, my prayer that circuits can organize for mission. And I'll loop back around to that before we finish this morning. Do it together. Don't do it separately. The devil wins when we're separate. Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. I believe the trajectory of many of our congregations could change if we did things together. Here's the third thing, and this is kind of pulls all the pieces together. And you're going to see in it kind of a marriage of the stuff from the car using the same words of vision, relationship, ministry or activity, and then structure. And a lot of you are familiar with concepts of life cycles and just the bell curve on how that stuff works. But I want to just kind of talk to you about it, and I want to give it to you as something that maybe you can use in evaluating your own congregations as well as your own circuits. Okay, because this is kind of what's behind this ultimately. So, with different phases, different stages in an organization's life cycle, we have the birth phase. I want you to note that it has high V and high R. What does that mean? Here's the little words that go with it. High vision, where are we going, who's going with us, what do we offer, and what do we control? When an organization is birthed, when a church is birthed, somebody's got an idea, and if you're all by yourself as a birthing, planting pastor, you're going to have to build some relationships or you got nothing, right? That's organization. The same thing's true for a business. Same thing's true for a school. Same thing's true for any type of organizational system where there has to be a birth moment, okay? And when that happens, it's high vision, high relationship. Now, as it grows, you begin to add product, you begin to add activity, you begin to add ministry, you begin to add function. But you notice that we've added structure, but what is structure at this point? A big S or a little s? Yeah, it's a little s. Because we don't want it to control what the Spirit might be doing in this moment. We want to give as much freedom in this moment for development. Because as soon as we start trying to control it, what do we start doing to the life of it? You know, sucking it out. Now, notice with me where the healthiest moment is in an organizational system. It's prime. Is it on the upslope, plateau, or downslope? I mean, I'm just asking stupid questions. I know it's on the upslope. The healthiest moment in an organization is when it's always advancing. Always advancing. When we hit maturity, that's a plateau. That's where vision is no longer as important. That's where we're kind of looking back and go, hey, remember 3 years ago when we had that stuff going on? We're still pretty cool. But vision doesn't have the edge on it that it used to. And we're all about relationships because we're enjoying this ride. This is kind of fun. Isn't it? It's the moment at the top of the roller coaster when you're at the top of the hill. And you kind of go, okay, something's about ready to happen. There's high relationship. You're grabbing hold of the person you don't know who's next to you and digging your fingernails into their arm. Because Kathy likes to go fast. I don't, okay, if you were here last night. And down the hill you go. Now, decline is already just the first step down the hill. We want to redefine that, and we don't want it to sound so harsh. But decline is the first step down the hill. And notice what's happened at that point. Vision's gone. And the relationship's not quite so important anymore. Because right now, as we're declining, we're going, yeah, but look what we do. Look at the product that we provide. Look how we're serving people. Okay? And then you have old age. Notice there's stuff that's missing. Vision's missing. Relationships missing. And now we're starting to go, you know what? I've turned the corner. I've become Dan and Bring. I'm ready to retire now. And life is changing. I think I'll go hang out at Starbucks this morning. You're going to regret you said that to me. I apologize, my brother. He was my first ever circuit visitor, so I have a love relationship with this guy. He's a good man. And thank you for your service. Can we just thank Richard and all of our retired guys? Thank you guys for your service to us. Many years as vice president of our district, too. And then you notice what's the only capital left at this point is structure. Because now I'm trying to hold on what I got left. Now I'm trying to hold on to what I got left. Because now I'm developing fear of loss. And then the final death is kind of a beep, little pipsqueak kind of structure. There's not much left. And the last people, the 12 that are gathered, say, We're here, we're going to bury each other, and the last one's going to turn the lights out. That's too true. Now, how do we interrupt a life cycle so that we keep change going? That's the point where you want to evaluate your organization and say, I need to introduce change here. It's counterintuitive. Normally we think we want to introduce change at these points. When, well, people are going to see a need now. You got to help them see the need and understand this stuff so that they're you're introducing change. You're introducing a new life cycle. I mean, it's like laying a whole nother life cycle on top of it, but that it develops at this point at prime. This point at prime is where you want it. And the idea organizationally is you have to enter at that point what's called the tunnel of chaos. And you have to invite your organization into this moment when it doesn't feel right that we don't think we should be doing this now because everything is, man, this is the best we've ever been. And now you want to bring change? And this is where you need to be very, very high R. High relationships, so you're taking the time to teach the principles and help people understand. This is where you need bring your brilliant people of your congregation who understand business and for some reason check their business brains at the front door when they're handed a bulletin on a Sunday morning. Invite them to engage and to teach this stuff as true. I'm not saying church is business, but we have first article realities. And I'm watching you guys. You're taking pictures of these screens because you know you live it. And you know, and you're already saying, where am I at in the organizational life cycle? Oh my goodness, I missed the change moment. Well, then step in and work on one. So here's this idea of life cycle intervention. Still the same kind of stuff, and so the idea that when you hit this point, it's time to revision. Because notice what the first thing is about ready to happen when you plateau. You go from big V to little v. So it's time for a revitalized vision. It's the revisioning. You have to bring a new vision, a fresh vision, okay, in order to see what God might want to do next. Then revitalization is happening at this point. A lot of times we think that's much further down the line, but it's not. I'll define some of these things in a second. And then reform is here. And then we're down here, you're really talking about rebirth or some sort of a radical change. Because if you're at that point, you're basically loving in the midst of hospice care. Hospice care is good. It's important. We get to love. We get to take time. But when we have done everything that can be done, right? That's what we have to be for the church. When we have done everything that we can do under the power of the Spirit, with us working together, the leadership that we can bring together collectively, then new things might happen. Now, revisioning, and this is a little tougher to see maybe, positive stuff is happening, but vision is waning. Plateau is imminent. New vision is needed to retain health and growth. Revision. It's right there at the part where we look the healthiest. Counterintuitive. Revitalize. The need for change is huge. You go, well, we're just kind of starting down the hill. No, it's huge right now because this is a moment of important intervention. Because once you start down the hill, how do you back up? Not very well. Health is slipping away and most are unaware. Leaders, that's us, are often in denial and we don't know what to do to lead change. We just don't know. And so sometimes we just go, well, maybe it'll get better. And we put our heads in the sand sometimes. Third one is reform. Here's the definition or the reality. Significant intervention is needed. Fear rules the day now. Leadership and resources needed are often limited or gone. There's often when I've gone into a congregation to provide some coaching along the way, and they're in a kind of a dire circumstance, as you talk to the people, you realize that most of their leaders left. And the people that are left are not leaders. And that's a tough one to recover from. Doesn't mean you can't. Got it? Power of the Holy Spirit, God's work. We all understand that. First article stuff. So that's where reform. So revision, revitalization, reform, and then rebirth. You know, Monty Python, you get a little bit of my sense of humor. I actually looked at the video on YouTube this morning of, "But I'm not dead yet." And I realized it was just really too gross to play in this company, so. But I do entrust it to you. Just don't tell. Our new district president assigned us this task as a church council to watch. I'm not dead yet. I did not. Okay? But it's this idea, though, that a lot of times we look at, but we're not dead yet. There's 12 of us. We're not dead yet. I love the guy, by the way, in Monty Python, where he goes, "Well, when will you be back for more bodies?" And he goes, "Next week." And the guy who's laying over his shoulder said, "I'm not dead yet. I think I'll take a walk." And he hits him in the head with his club. But anyway. Laugh, right? It's important to laugh. What has to happen there? Radical, high-risk taking steps required. This is the place of redemptive death. This is the place that unless the seed falls to the ground, the life doesn't come forth. Oh. So, a new life cycle. The whole idea of a new life cycle is that if you're working at it and you're on top of it, this is as far as you ever go on the life cycle. Because every time you come to prime, you're introducing new change and a new revised, revitalized vision so that you just keep developing and growing. Because as soon as you plateau, you have the big M, the big mo, momentum that's going to be harder to shift. This is the goal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's where we live. Most of us don't live there. Most of us live on one of these places. Now, one of the things as you look at this, Gary Norton, Gary, stand up for those who don't know you, would you please? This is Gary Norton of our staff, and he works in the area of revitalization. He's not a scary guy. He's a good guy. He's a loving guy. He helps your congregation work through evaluating where they're at on this stuff. I'm watching him, I'm talking, and he's just nodding his head like, yep, this is it. It's how it works. But see Gary, ask him for help, because you know where you're at. Remember that Heidelberg Disputation quote that I used the other day? I don't know if it comes up in this or not. But a good theologian doesn't mix theology of glory and theology of the cross. A good theologian, I think it's Heidelberg Statement 21, says, we see the truth and call it for what it is. This is good theology because it's first article stuff, and we live there too. There. So, I told you I was going to come back around for circuits. This idea of circuits organizing for mission. Where do you see your circuit's life cycle? What if you ask that question collectively? What if you met together as lay leaders? Remember, you need lay champions in this effort. Don't do it as a bunch of pastors alone. Because your lay people are just going to think you're trying to take over. Or are you going to try to change them without their participation? What you're trying to do if you're not involving your lay champions is you're skipping the relationship seat. Do not skip the relationship seat. What's there? Resourcing congregations. Are there those that are prime, or maybe they're at plateau, but they've got a lot of stuff to offer? How can we use them to assist over here? Right? How can we assist? Partnering, coaching, dual parish, merger, multi-site. I hope you see my questions and how it fits to my whole philosophy of leadership and the importance of what the seats in the car mean. Because this whole thing falls apart if you don't have the right seats, the right things in the right seat. It's kind of like good to great, right? You got the right people in the right seats on the right bus going the right direction. And this is very much that way too. What's the new thing that needs to be done together? Swim down together. Swim down together. See, it changes trajectory often when we can do that. When everything that has been done, can be done, has been done, then it's time for a new life cycle in some cases. And this was the idea and the question that I was asking: are there legacy congregations in our circuits that could be redemptive deaths for the sake of new plants, new work that begins a brand new high V, high R, small m, small s, first step, birth level of life cycle? Imagine what could be done if the legacy resources stayed in the circuits. You guys like that idea. I had a lot of people say, we like that one, right? But here's the idea for it. That it's in support as often as possible, right, for new work. If you're needing an infusion of cash in your congregation, that's not what my idea is. I just thought I'd get it out there before someone suggested that as an option. Committed relationship, long haul, relationships, relationship. And then the idea of pooling resources. Do you see how it fits? The whole principle. All of us seeing ourselves together. You need a Dory and you need a Nemo, right, to help lead the charge. Who will pick that up in your circuits? Who will do that? And then to think about the resources that we have. What's the district's role? Researching, coaching, permission giving, telling the story, and repeating. Those are my three things.